He's a 5-time Bassmaster winner, a 6-time FLW winner, a former Bassmaster Classic champion, a former Bassmaster Angler of the Year, a former Forest Wood Cup champion, and a Bass Fishing Hall of Famer. This week, David Fritts joins me on...
I'm Bob Cobb from the Bassmaster. Welcome to Mercer.
Welcome one, welcome all, friends, family, freeloaders, fishing freaks. You guys know the drill. You're all welcome here at the Awkwardly Honest Fishing Podcast that goes by my last name, which is Mercer. Welcome into episode 139. And happy hump day to all our humpers that tune in week after week. You know I love and appreciate each and every one of you. This week's show is going to be a very fun show and one that I've actually looked forward to for a while. I've wanted to have him on, and my schedule got busy, his schedule got busy. Anyways, but let's not worry about the past. Let's worry about the present. He's going to be on. But before we talk about this week's show, let's talk about last week's show. I believe that me and Randy had a very civil debate, and as I've said about 700 times in the comments, maybe that's an exaggeration. Through civil debate, we all learn. Me and Randy left the conversation feeling good about it. I mean, I've talked to him since then, and we thought it was a unique podcast, an opportunity to, look at two different directions on something. But boy, in between us and you guys getting a hold of it, the comments went nuts. Last I checked, there was over 800 comments. And hey, man, people are passionate. Let's just say that. Listen, I told Randy this, I'll tell you guys this. I have literally never had a podcast guest that I've had literally hundreds of people, like no joke, hundreds of people have messaged me last week and said, I watch every single week, but I can't watch this episode. But I've also never had a podcast guest with more people that have messaged and said, like, what this guy says is the gospel. And they just start repeating his diatribe and what Randy stands for. So it was a lesson in human nature. Let's just say that way. So remember, we all love to fish. We all do it in different ways. There's no need to get into some of the stuff that you guys got into in the comments. But to be honest, I mean, if I was a smarter YouTuber, I'd shut up and I'd poke you guys and I'd say, hey, yeah, bet you won't say this again. Because the more you comment, the better it is. That's how an algorithm works. People throw the name algorithm around, but it's simple. It's interactions. So if you like this podcast, feel free to comment at any time. I mean, you don't even have to say a word. Just give me a thumbs up. I mean, because that's what the algorithm responds to. People responding to the show. The length of time you guys watch, the length of how you interact, what you watch afterwards, believe it or not. If you are somebody who watches the entire podcast and then goes and watches some more YouTube, it actually ranks higher on the algorithm. It's crazy. But anyways, I appreciate you all for tuning into this show. Even some of you guys who said some not nice things about me in the comments, but I can get over that. Speaking of which, it is the festive season. This is our first show in December. So Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy Festivus, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. Happiness, okay? And this week's show is all about happiness. Really, it's a celebration of an incredible career, an incredible, an innovator, an amazing, at his time, in his peak in the 90s, I mean, David Fritts was one of the most intimidating anglers there is. What he knows about a crankbait, there's very few people on earth that can compete with him when it comes to that technique. But he's an old school dude. I'll tell you how old school he is. Right before, and we'd set this up, we're going to record this, and right before I sent him a text and said, hey, shoot me your email address so I can send him the link for the video. And I got a response that was 2 different mailing addresses. And I'm like, no. I need the other mail. So we did get connected and have a great conversation. I never brought this up, but it's funny because I remember the weird thing about my job is a lot of the stuff that I yell on stage and everything was things I yelled as a kid. I just get paid to do it now. So there's certain guys that come along and you have questions that literally have burned in your loins. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but have burned for years where you wanted somebody to answer it. Well, lo and behold, I get this job where it's my job to ask people questions. And I've asked David this several times. I didn't ask it for him on the show because we kind of played it out on stage. But I swear to you, so I was in my late 20s, whatever, when Fritts, or my late teens, early 20s, 19, 20 years old, however old I was when he won the Classic and all that sort of stuff. And I swear to you, for everybody who's ever seen that footage, and if we have the technology, maybe I'll try to put that footage on here somehow. But man, what he would do, he would hook a fish on a crankbait and he would literally walk that fish the whole way around the boat. You got to remember, lines were different, technology was different. And he would, sometimes do 2, sometimes 3 laps of the boat to tire the fish out. And I swear to you, when I was a kid watching on the couch, I was literally screaming this at the television. And I got to ask him because you would see him so gingerly walking around and just hand over hand. He would go around every obstruction and stuff like that. And you'd see him and he'd always get to, the back of the motor. Obviously, you got to work it around there. But he would get to this one thing that would cause him nothing but mayhem. And it was the light post in the corner. So when he would get to the light post, he would have to pass his rod to one side and get it to the other and bring it back. And I swear to you, a teenage version of me was screaming at the TV, remove the light post. I mean, it's 12 noon. It is as bluebird a day as possible, and we still have that giant light post, and David Fritts is still handing it around. So that was literally the first question I ever asked David Fritts when I got to work with him. I think his answer was, I never thought of that. But he is truly a legend in this sport. He is a Hall of Famer. It has been an honor to spend time with him on stage at Bassmaster events and just be a tiny little part of his incredible career. And at a time when there is a lot of people bickering for different reasons in the fishing world, this is a time we all come together and we celebrate a legit legend, a groundbreaker. I mean, David Fritts is that special to this sport. And I know there's a lot of young viewers that are like, what is that? It's all about other guys. Before those guys, there was these guys. And without these guys, there is nothing. And I'm happy to present one of those guys, the one and only Mr. David Fritts. David Fritts, I have wanted to do this with you for a while. And I don't know if you realize this, but you're a huge, we're going to talk about a lot of your career highlights. But for me, growing up a fishing nerd, I guess, whatever you want to explain it as, when you came to the Elite Series, same thing when Larry came last year. It is a huge, just personally, I don't have anything to do, but the 12-year-old version of me is kind of freaking out, I guess, is what I'm saying. Because every time I got to announce you, and that's a unique thing about the sport of fishing, because generally, if you grow up watching guys compete, by the time you get there to work for Bass, they're no longer competing. So I consider myself very lucky and very honored to have been able to introduce you on the Bassmaster Elite Series. So personally, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you done a great job. It was always a pleasure. I was there in the race Scott days, and Ray was fantastic at it too. And
The best.
yeah, he always brought the best out of people, and that's been your goal too. It's been man, it's been a pleasure.
I hate to not have you on the Elite Series anymore, but I couldn't think of anything more than to celebrate your amazing career. I know how humble you are, but is there ever a part of you that's, brushing your teeth in the morning and you think, how in the world did this happen? I mean, you dreamed of doing something and literally have lived that dream.
Believe it or not, I think maybe back when I won the Classic or Angler of the Year, I'm thinking, man, I'm on top of the world, and really, I never look back, and it's just been everything has sort of fell into place, and it comes from a lot of different things, but and then the development of crankbaits. I mean, when the Fritts side come out, all these young kids come up, and they know who you are, and before the people that watch bass fishing knew that you won a Classic, you won Angler of the Year, you won the FLW Championship, Portswood Cup, and this and that. But then the very young anglers, I'm talking about the ones that are 8, 9, 10 years old, come up to you and bring a Fritz sign and want to sign. That's pretty special.
Very special. When did it start for you? Well, like at what age do you remember? I mean, I know you won the first Classic you fished. I know you fished Redmond before that, but at what age did David Fritts say, "Hey, man, I think I'm going to try fish for a living"?
Well, I'm like everybody else out there watching. You want to do it, and a lot of times your funds don't permit you to do it, and that was my problem. I was helping my dad in a tire shop. I was actually retreading tires, and I was putting the rubber on the tires and changing tires and all that good stuff. In 1981, there was a tournament called the Thorns Bass Bowl, and it was on Bugs Island Lake. And I'm talking about 1981. Now, I fished tournaments before then, but mostly club tournaments and little bitty jackpot tournaments. But this was a big tournament. It had 420 or 30 people and 420 or 30 boats in this thing. And I got fortunate enough to win that. And that's really when I thought, you know what? If I can just get me some money together. And then in 1985, when I won the Redmond Regional, that gave me a truck and boat, then won it again the next year, and then we actually won 2 more of them. So by 1989, and I'd done fished a bass event or 2, I finally had saved up enough money to go fish. And I'm thinking, this is going to be easy. Well, I go all year long into the fall, and then he made a dime. And then I win 2 tournaments in a row, and the rest of it's sort of history. So that was really my breaking point. That's when, I always worked for my dad, but that's the time that I fishing was number one. That's what I did. So 1989, that's when I retired from working and started fishing.
And how old were you then?
Oh, Lord, I graduated in 75, 85, so that made me 17, 27, 28, somewhere along in there.
So in your late 20s.
Not like these young kids is in there today, man.
Yeah, that to me blows me away that an 18-year-old can qualify for, like, I look at my 17-year-old son and I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, this kid's getting ready to drive across the country.
Yeah.
But you were in that situation too, not at the same age, but how was the reaction to family, friends, people around you when you said, "Hey, I'm gonna be one of those guys. I'm gonna fish for a living"?
Well, I think my sister understood it. My dad said, "You'll starve to death." That was the exact words from my dad. You're going to starve to death. But he supported me. And then when I come home from winning the Classic in Birmingham, he was the first one there to give me a hug. And he told me he was wrong. And I didn't want him to be wrong. I mean, didn't want to feel that way, but I knew I could do this. It was just a matter of having the finances, and I wish I could have started 5 or 10 years earlier, because I was really in my prime and from about 22, 23 on. But I learned a lot, and I learned a lot every year that I fished. I would learn something that helped me, and then it sort of peaked in the early 90s, 93, 92. Actually, I should have made the Classic in 92, and I never will forget, I threw back a fish at Lake Murray.
No.
I had one fish, and it cost me, I missed the Classic by 1 pound.
Ouch.
I broke down, and so don't never do that. Or I would have made the Classic in 92. So the one Bob Hamilton won.
Yeah, Robert Hamilton Jr. I remember it. Do you think if you could go back right now with all the knowledge that you have and give that David Fritts some advice, what would you tell him?
Oh man. Well, you know, really, you can't tell these young guys anything. They know it. But I would say be truthful, number one thing, because I've heard too many people get up on stage and talk about and say they caught them on the bait and they didn't catch them on that. And that's my number one pet peeve. One thing is to be honest.
Yeah.
And be truthful. Even though you catch them on different brand crankbait, just tell them you caught them on a crankbait. You ain't got to say I caught them on X brand, and be lying about it. So, and that's one thing I never did. I always told the truth, and I always treated people the way that I wanted to be treated. And I really tried to help. You know, back in the day, we had a circuit, a seminar circuit that Gary, what's his last name? Gary. But anyways, the Bass
Gary Judici?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary, he's from Oklahoma. But anyway, my mind, that's thing when you get 67 years old, you know, you and almost 68 next month. So, but I think that if I had one thing to pass on, and the thing is, I passed it on all the years that I've been fishing. You know, I would tell people in seminars exactly what I was doing, exactly everything. But I think the main difference was, and the reason it didn't never come back to haunt me is because most people just didn't have the feel for that bait, a crankbait, like I had. And, you know, even when I'm up there at Berkeley, you know, on the tank, I close my eyes and I test that crankbait. I don't look at it. I close my eyes. I eventually look at it, but it's just the feel that you have developed from throwing one for 50 years, you know, and you know when something is really good. But I guess above all, be honest, be truthful, and work hard. You know, this day and time, I was talking to Patrick Walters, and he says, you know, you don't throw till you see a fish, and I'm thinking, well, what's that? I mean, you know, I'm used to finding fish with my bait, just like Rick Clunn, just like Larry Nixon, Davey Hyde. You know, we're used to finding fish with your bait, and that's been the hardest thing to overcome, and still haven't overcome it, because one thing, I ain't got the eyes to see as good as I would like to, but and I don't have the knowledge to set my stuff up like they have them. I mean, a lot of them are getting what, 10, 12 transducers on their boat, so it makes it a little difficult. Anyway, it's just a different deal, and you know, I'm used to reading the flasher. I still got flashers on my boat, and they still give you an advantage. The problem is the fish don't live on drops. They don't live where they used to live because of the pressure. And you know, now there's so many fish being caught in open water. That's how most of, you know, that's where the majority of the fish are now. But you know, fishing has really changed over the years.
It really has. And one thing that stood out to me throughout your career, whether I was watching it as a kid or watching, you have always been the guy who searches for the stuff that nobody else is searching for. Like if you look at your whole career, I mean, back then when you won the Classic, you were fishing a different way than the majority of the field, in a different depth of water. And now, I mean, is that why has the crankbait and why has that been different? Like, where did that start happening for you?
I don't know. I fell in love with it back in 1974 and 1975 when I first started fishing, and I never could feel one bite my worm. I'd pull a worm, and every time I'd hit a rock, I think I had a bite, But I knew if I tied that crankbait on it, and believe it or not, back in those days, I was throwing a Zipco 1, if you know what that is, a spinning reel.
Yeah.
Not a open face, but I mean a closed face push button reel, and that thing would whip you like a dog. But I knew if I kept throwing that crankbait, sooner or later I was going to catch some fish, and that's how I got started with it. And I just never quit. I knew if I stuck with it and I kept looking, figure out what depth they're in, figure out what color they want, figure out what action they want, figure out how to retrieve it. And all that stuff just kept getting better and better. And I think my biggest move was in 1985 when I fished the first Red Man Regional. It was on Lake Sinclair in Milledgeville, Georgia. And man, I lost so many fish. I probably didn't even catch. I probably caught 50% of the bites that I had. And that day I said, you know what? Anybody would have caught those fish I lost would beat me. I said, if I can ever figure out how to get those fish in the boat, then I'm gonna win some tournaments. And that's what I did. I mean, it was a matter of making some adjustment and changing your equipment a little bit. But man, once I figured that out, I could catch 9 out of 10 bites. And I probably can't. Many people say that right now. They catch 9 out of 10. So that's what happened with me with a crankbait. And I think that was my biggest push to where I am today.
You said when you throw a bait, when you're testing baits on a tank, you close your eyes. Can you tell before even fishing a bait that this has got the action that a fish wants?
Well, I can tell by fishing a crankbait and closing my eyes that feel when it gets that really, you can't tell people how to feel. That's been the whole deal with crankbaits. You can't tell people how to feel. But when I had that certain feel, I knew that bait had a real good chance. And then we'd go back and tweak it. And them guys laughed at me out. Well, they did at Rapala when I made the DTs and at Berkeley, they think, man, ain't you gonna look at your bait? I said, no. A lot of times I just turn my body and wind and just, let my tools feel what's going on. And once you learn that little bitty feel, I mean, that's when you know something is really good. I guess the worst trouble I ever got into, and everybody has heard of Yarmo Rapala, and I may have told this story before, but he had sent me, we were working on DTs. I took him out in the cornfield, and I showed him what was important, being able to cast a long way. And then we went to some kind of little stream where he trout fished at, and I tried to teach him. I tried to tell a lot of people about the feel, and I remember he sent me some baits, and man, they weren't even close. So I taped a quarter to one of them and sent it back, and he called me. Want to know what the quarter was for? I said, it's worth something now. So, and did I ever get the thrashing of my life? I ain't never heard such words. But anyway, I didn't do that anymore to him, but I have done it many times. And that's the thing with crankbaits. Some of them are good. Some of them are okay. Some of them are terrible. In fact, a lot of them are terrible, to be honest with you. Then you run across a bait of a lifetime, like some of the bad shad that we made at Berkeley was, man, that was just a killer bait. I mean, you could outfish any other swimming bait like it with that bait. But then when the Fritts side come out, it just knocked everything in the hole. I mean, once in a lifetime, once in I don't know, 50 years, you make a bait that all you got to do is throw it out and wind it in, and one bites it. And that's what's been the huge success. That's why they sell millions of them. So because it's a no-brainer. And yeah, it's sort of like the A-rig and a lot of those things. It's going to settle down a little bit, and it does have its time zone when it's really good. But I knew when I saw that bait in the tank, and when I fished it, I said, man, I said, I want 2 weeks to make sure that I can't make it better. And I said, we got something special here. And I told the guys there in Spirit Lake, Iowa, I said, we got something really special here. And the rest is history. You see what it's done. So, and the Raffle DTs, all those baits, especially the DT6, they're all really good special baits. Even some of the Poes and way back in the 80s and 90s. But those baits were really, really special. So, and it all comes from just feel. And a lot of fishermen don't understand. They throw a crankbait out there and they stick their rod in the water, and then that takes away all your feel when you stick your rod in the water. I said, listen, you can't do that, because you're not going to be able to truly feel that bait, or when a fish is up close to it or pushes it or anything else, you can't feel it. So that's the number one. And I still say that today when I do a seminar. That's the number one thing in crankbait fishing, is learning the feel and knowing the difference between when something's not right.
So when you and speaking of something special, I have this, but many people don't know. One of 4 of this is actually you said there was one of 4 pre-run Fritts side. This is the junior. But in the little note that I have that you wrote for it, it says how this is where you would tune everything and make sure that the production models were exactly what you. Yeah. So what do you do to, like, what is your process, if you wouldn't mind telling me, when you get that bait, what goes into it for you to know that this is what we need to have?
Well, it's something a lot of people can't do. And another thing, I have the other 3, so you're the only one that's got one of those.
Oh, wow.
Now I have some clear ones where we were going through 27 or 28 different prototypes to get where we were. And, that's sort of the story goes on and on. But to make sure, we do the same process as we do when we're developing it. I go out there and make sure, compare it. I look at it in a tank. I look at it every situation, top, bottom, side, everything. And we've got ways, Berkeley, to measure that. So we can really tell if it's exact. And they got it on the head. I mean, a lot of times you're real nervous, because a lot of times you'll send a great bait, and we've done this. You'll send something that's fantastic, and it comes back just a little bit different. And a lot of times, you're too far in the process. If it's not a whole lot of difference, sometimes it gets gone. But that bait there was exactly like the prototype bait that we had at the start.
You are widely considered maybe the greatest crankbait angler but if there was a Mount Rushmore of crankbait anglers, I don't think there's any argument from anybody on earth you would be on that. Who else do you look at? Like, who would be up there with you?
Oh man, that's a hard question. Rick Clunn's always thrown one, but he's been in a little different class than me because he always fished shallow.
Yeah.
And Rick is very, very proficient with the crankbait. Van Dam is good with, and actually I took Van Dam fishing, so he had a good reason. He got a lot, and I think I give him a lot of good pointers, because we was at Lake Eufaula, and I needed him and Mickey Bruce to do good in that tournament and make the Classic move up, so I could get into the Classic, because I was right on the bubble. And I don't remember what year this was, 90 something. Might have even been 2000. So I took both of them fishing, give them all my fishing spots, and really either one of them, it would have been toss up who won. I ended up just going fishing in 10th. I never will forget that. And they got mad at me because they said, well, you held out some spots. I didn't held out no spots. I just went fishing. But that's sort of how that deal works. I don't know who, there's a lot of good crankbait fishermen, and I'm trying to think. Probably besides Rick Klein, and Rick, I think he may have won a tournament on a deep crankbait. I don't know, but most of the time he was mostly shallow, like 5 foot or less. And he was hard to beat with that square lip and some of the little baits that he threw. He used to throw a Bill Norman, a little bitty Bill Norman. I don't remember what they call it now, mini R or something, or mini. Anyway, I don't know. Crankbaits are sort of like spinner baits. They're getting a little more timely. Like certain times of the year, they're real good, and then the rest of the time of the year, they're not as good as they should be. And that's what spinnerbaits went through, back several years ago. Now chatterbaits have taken over, and but the crankbaits still cold weather or in the fall, still nothing any better.
It's an incredible bait. And when you look at your career, you were definitely a crankbait specialist. Then you had guys like Denny Brower who were jig specialists, and so on and so on for every bait category. Like if we get to a jig tournament, Denny's going to play. Tommy Biffle's going to play. If we get to a cranking tournament, everybody knows you still play to this day.
Yeah.
Can you be that anymore? Can you be that kind of specialist on the Elite Series?
I don't think so, just because of the schedule and going up for smallmouth, going up north, and that's just become a strictly Sonar tournament. I can see my crankbait on my Lowrance forward facing. I can see it come back, but that sort of makes me nervous. I don't know that I want to see it. I want to be feeling, and that was a big difference. But I really don't think, besides something with a hook and lead on it or a hook and tungsten or whatever, I don't think any one bait can be dominant anymore. We have crankbait tournaments, and then we have, every now and then we'll hit on a jig tournament. We have chatterbait tournaments, but mostly, drop shots, finesse fishing. That's sort of what fishing has evolved to.
The other thing that's evolved, I thought it was great how you said always be honest, but then you also said if you're not throwing the brand, just tell them you're throwing a crankbait. So there is a way to be sneaky and still be honest, which
That's
I
right.
appreciate.
That's right.
But you can't keep secrets anymore. Like some of the stuff that you did back in the day when the Fritts Blitz was a thing, and you were dominating for as long as you did in the 90s. Nobody got to see everything. Nowadays, if you've got a live camera on you, you know exactly what you're throwing, how you're throwing it, if you're putting a pause in it, if you're speeding it up or whatever you're doing. How tough has that been to adjust to as a competitive angler? Secrets are a big part of this game.
Well, it is, and you can look at forward facing sonar. It's big secrets how these guys got everything hooked up, and so that gives them advantage. Well, crankbait fishing used to be the same way, but to be honest, that never really bothered me. We were at Santee Cooper, and this wasn't necessarily with the crankbait, but I broke the bass record one day. What was it, 5 fish or something like that? It weighed 34 or something. OT Fields broke it the next day, and they ended up beating me by an ounce or two in that tournament. But and we were fishing with competitors in the boat, right neck to neck, shoulder to shoulder, and I was doing something with my bait that he didn't. He didn't catch fish, and I catch 34 pounds. And the same way with crankbaits. Back in the Hungry Fisherman days, I was way before you, but. I won 6 or 7 of those things and won their championship also, the Hall of Fame Classic. And I never will forget, and those guys would get up there and they'd stick their rod in the water, and they just wasn't paying attention to what their bait was doing. And one thing I can still keep a secret is all about feel. And 98% of the people don't have a clue what a crankbait feels like. Yeah, if they throw it out there and they say, yeah, that's how it feels, but they can't tell when a fish is around their bait, or they can't tell when something's not exactly right. Now, if it's real severe, like they're not slacking your line or something like that, yeah, you can feel that. But it's those little bitty things, and that's why I say if you know, I was winning on TV doing the same thing, and they just it boiled down to you can't tell anybody how to feel. That's the bottom line, and that's the number one thing in fishing is learning to feel. And there's not very many people that'll do that. Now, when fish are I call them suicide fish. When you're lining, they grab hold and they take off and your rod bends. Yep, I got him. Well, that's a suicide fish, and we have those days, but there's a lot of days that we don't, and that's where knowing what a bait is supposed to do, and just learning the feel of it. And like I say, I wish, and I tell this at my seminars, I wish I could tell somebody how to feel, and you can't tell them how to feel. I mean, there's no
True.
way you can teach feel. Is just pay attention, and when you throw one 10, 12, 14 hours a day, every day, a lot about it.
Well, you definitely know a lot about it. One thing we don't know a lot about, though, is tell me about those draw days when it was pro against pro. Like, there's a little evil part of me that grew up as a giant wrestling fan and fishing fan that I think if we brought that back, it would, I mean, with the live cameras now, it would literally be incredible. But there must have been a ton of gamesmanship, or whatever you want to refer to it as, in those days.
Well, that was a big time strategy, and you had to plan it, and hopefully you didn't draw these little group of people that's over here to my right. If you drew them, it was going to be bad. But a lot of times when you drew somebody, I drew Jimmy Houston, and I remember him specifically because, Jimmy's going to throw a spinnerbait. So, I only get 3 or 4 hours throwing my crankbait, and then we got to go, and he's going to be throwing a spinnerbait up in water when I need to be throwing it on the side of the boat. So it gets very competitive, very, very, very competitive. I never drew Rick. I always wanted to draw Rick Plun, and, I fished with Larry. I fished with a lot of good guys. Biffle, I fished with Forrest Wood. I mean, I fished with a lot of different people over the years. And usually it was just pretty easy. And most of the time, everybody just got along good. But, when you're actually, when we had co-anglers, it was actually worse than fishing with a pro. Believe it or not, because
Really?
most times co-angler wanted to throw 5 feet across your line that way. But I finally figured out a way to offset that too. But there's a lot of strategy in it. And like I say, it boiled down to filling my bait, especially on the crankbait bite. A lot of times I wouldn't get to do it all day, and it would cost me. But that's what it boiled down to, because I've had people in my boat throw out there and be winding the crankbait, and they do this right here, and they say, "Yep, I'm hung up." I said, "Yeah, he's about a 6-pounder right out there." Didn't even know he had a fish. He's hung up. So and I'm talking about in the Classic. I went behind a very reputable, and I left out Paul Lice on this deal too, being the crankbait guru. But Paul was really good at it, and he created a lot of stuff. But in the Classic, there was a guy that was a pretty good crankbait fisherman, and I'm thinking, man, if I could just get over there. And I went by 2 or 3 times, I knew I could catch them if I ever got there. And they were sitting there and sitting there. And so anyway, I come back by, and he was about 75 yards down that ridge. I said, I'm going to stop. I got this one stump I'm going to throw at. And I pull it up there, and I catch one, I catch one, I catch one, I catch one. And this guy, I'm not saying no names, was coming over to me, and he got up there, and I sort of held my rod under the water. I didn't want to see what I was doing. I want to know what I was doing. He said he'd been there all day, and I caught a fish, and I pull up there and catch 4 on 4 casts. So, things like that happens, and it makes you feel good. And just because you know what to do, the secrets in crankbait is one, learning the depth, knowing how deep each bait you have runs, and how deep the fish are. Then what color, because a lot of people say, well, color don't matter. Color doesn't matter sometimes, but sometimes it is so important. It's incredible. I mean, when I won the Classic, chartreuse with a blue back, and you could throw any other color made, and they wouldn't bite it, or they would knock at it and not get it. But that bait they would get. So that gives you an advantage. And then knowing how to retrieve it. You know, I'm using these old Lew's BB1s with, what were they? 4:3 to 1 ratio, 21 inches per turn. We still got the 21 inch per turn reels, but, and that was a big key that because I like to wind fast. So I could adjust that a little bit and figure out something. But I'm gonna tell you, those days when pros fish with pros, nobody wants to do it anymore, but they were real special because one thing we could learn other techniques. You know, you fish with Denny Breyer, you're going, and the same way with Jimmy Houston. Jimmy Houston is so accurate, the most accurate caster I've ever been in the boat with. He could take a spinnerbait and throw it back through 4 trees and hit the bank. And I just couldn't. I got away from him. One thing, if I get to the bank, I'm gonna be in the trees. And he was throwing that thing all the way back, and I'm thinking, man alive, he's got to be the best caster in the world for throwing in shallow cover. And then Biffle and Breyer, they the same thing. They could, you know, you got a cup up there the size of a silver dollar, and they throw in it, and that's what it amounts to. And their feel is a grade above everybody else's too. They know when they got a bite. You know, sometimes we pick up and we feel them spit it out. Well, they know the difference, and that's what makes them good at what they do. So you learn a lot of different techniques fishing with other guys, but man, those were the greatest fishing days in the world.
Who would you get most excited to draw? Like I'm hoping I draw so and so.
Oh man. I tell you, well, I can tell you, I drew Guido Hibden at Potomac River, and I thought, man, this is going to be the worst day. And I had a chance to win the tournament. And Guido sat on the back of the boat, never threw where I was throwing, and probably the greatest draw I ever had. And I never had a clue that he was going to try to help me. I didn't win, I finished second, but I always finished second at Potomac. So, but I remember that as good as it was yesterday, how much and how good a fella Guido was, and how important he knew what winning was, and give you a chance to win. These guys today, that don't happen. They're not going to give you a chance to win. But that was the occasion when I thought I had the worst draw, and I actually had the best draw. I guess I really don't know who would be that I didn't want to fish with, because I enjoyed it with everybody I fished with. My deal was, if I drew somebody that I knew was going to be on the bank and being in knee-deep water all day, that was a draw I didn't want, and that was several people. But you know, I wanted to learn, and so I really, to my knowledge, and I'm trying to think back, I don't think I ever had a bad draw. I really don't. And one thing, because I got to do what I want to do, a lot of times it's just for 4 or 5 hours. I remember. Do you remember Craig Daniels?
Yeah.
But he lives here on Smith Lake, and I was fishing. It wasn't a bass tournament. It was another tournament, a Hungry Fisherman tournament, and I was leading the tournament. No, I was in second. He was leading the tournament, and I drew him. And I'm thinking, man, he's throwing a spinning rod with 4-pound line. I'm thinking, man alive. I said, Craig, just let me have a couple hours. And I knew I had it. But as far as bad for me, that was probably the worst draw ever, because I let him do, because he was ahead of me. But I could have won that tournament if I'd have drew anybody else. So, and I was catching on a crankbait up on a little underwater point. And when I went there that morning, they just wasn't there yet. It was real cold. It was in December. No, it was in January. So, and I love Craig to death. He's a great guy. Actually, I tried to help him a little bit in some of the classics, but that was probably just because he was leading the tournament. But yeah, I love fishing with anybody. It don't matter to me.
So you made comment that the people today, the anglers today, that they don't have that same cordial, I guess, approach to things. It's a little bit more dog eat dog. Am I reading that right?
I would say that's probably it. In the past, back in the day, when you knew somebody was leading the tournament or second or third and had a chance to win, there's only 2 or 3 guys you had to worry about coming in on top of you, and I'm not going to name them, but if you got by them, you were good because everybody was going to give you an opportunity to win. And I think that's still true in ways, but it's more when fishing changed to $100,000 first place, all that stuff changed. So people got more hungry, more eager, didn't mind on stepping on some toes, and which you always had 4 or 5 guys that you had to worry about anyway. But I think that's one of the main differences I see from the Larry Nixon, Rick Klein, myself, all the Guido Head and all the Paul Ice, that era, we all had respect for each other, probably more so than we do now. Because now it's sort of like a dog eat dog and $100,000, we're going to win no matter what. And a lot of that comes from, I think the younger guys are probably a little worse at that than the veterans are. And you take Larry, even right now, Larry would never come within a mile if he knew where you were at. And Rick Klein would do the same thing. I mean, those guys, we just grew up in a time and place where we respected each other, and we knew if you had a chance to win, that's what we did. So, but anyway, times have changed.
Times definitely have changed. And some would say that's the evolution of the sport, the competition, every sport. I mean, you'd listen to people tell stories about football back in the day or anything. I think everything has changed. I mean, the big buzzword is grow the sport, but with growing the sport it becomes a lot more aggressive. It becomes a lot more dog eat dog. Do you think it was easier to become a pro back then, or is it easier to become a pro today? Because they've got the advantage of technology, but they also have the disadvantage of everybody seeing every move they make. Mm-hmm. And boy, it just feels like there is more and more pros every the heyday of the sport, as many people want to refer to it as. I get it. I mean, there was one tour, there was one group of guys, and if you were part of that 50, it was the heyday. Well, now there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people trying to become pro anglers.
Yeah.
Who's got the easier route? When you started, or somebody who's starting this year?
Well, I think when I started, it may have been a little bit easier. Not that the competition was any easier. It was just, if you could do good, you could get help better, and you could get support, more support. And, in the older days, and I'm talking about the 80s, 90s, 2000, it was actually a lot of competition. I mean, it wasn't handed to you on a plate. You had to be lucky. You had to really be on top of your game, just like you do now. But now it's more diluted, and the young guys, and it becomes an eye game, and who's the best video player. And I hate to put it like that, but that's about what it boils down to. But I think right now, and it may be because I'm slipping and I still want to find them with my bait instead of looking at them, but I think it's a lot harder now. I really do. I just, man, I told my son, and my son's a pretty good fisherman, but, to get in there and get to be where you need to be, man alive, it's tremendous. But we are seeing young people come and go, maybe a little bit more than we did in the past, but and I think that's true. But competition is key, and it's just dog eat dog, and an 18-year-old, 19, 20-year-old guy gets in there and he thinks, well, I'll call Berkeley and get me $50,000. That ain't going to happen. And a lot of times they think the sport is, I don't know how to say the words, but they think they can make more money than what the normal is. And I think that this day and time, with the exception of 4 or 5 people, and that's the way it's always been, 4 or 5 people made the most money. And back then it may have been 12 or 15 or 20. And now it's just very few, but everybody gets a little piece, just enough to keep them interested and keep them going. So they have to really depend on winnings. But if you win enough, then you're going to get there. But it's a lot tougher now. It really is. And I see it, being with Berkeley for all these years and Rapala too. It's just, man, you see all the competition out there for a handful of money, and then the more you get in there, the more it gets diluted. So I think that's what they're having to deal with now, and I think it's tough. I mean, I just think this day and time, to quit a job and just go fishing, man, that's which I was stupid. My daddy said I was stupid back in the 80s. He didn't say stupid. He just said, I'm going to starve to death. That's what he said. So, and this day and time, that definitely can happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a cool moment when your dad, for any kid, I think when their dad says, hey man, you were right. You did stuff. And I think from a parent, you always just, now that I have kids and I look at them, what do you want for your kid? You just want them to be safe and happy. Like at the end of the day, so pro fishing is not generally safe. Anything that you try to do where you're chasing something that you love is tough, I think.
It's tough.
You've definitely hinted around I don't know if you're even hinting about it. I think I know how you feel. The forward facing sonar thing. It feels like from our conversation that not only you're not a fan, but well, I don't want to answer for you. You tell me where you're at with forward facing sonar.
Well, I'll tell you what I can't get over, and that's finding fish with your bait. And that happens sometimes in early spring. It happens a little bit in the fall. But pretty much, them guys in the bag line hit it on the head and don't even cast till you see one. And I can see images, but I don't have the same equipment. Even though I got the same brand, I just don't have my equipment like some of them have it. So, but that's how fishing is this day and time. That's just, the side imaging caught most of the fish on the breaks and on the drop off. That's why there's not many fish out there anymore, except on very few occasions. And fish get more timely. They get there, they're only up there for a few minutes and they leave. And I think side imaging done that. So everything has played a big role now, and I'm sure the forward facing is going to play out. I really think it will. Now, it may not, where you've got millions of fish up north in Lake Erie and some of those Great Lakes, but I think eventually it's sort of like the Alabama rig. It's sort of played down a little bit now. Fish got used to it. So that's the way it is with everything. But I admire the guys that have got good enough eyes to see it, and it's just hard for us older guys to get used to sitting there watching that and not casting. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. I see something looks good, I gotta throw. Well, them guys, they idle around over it and they look at it. If they don't see a fish, they only make a cast, crank it and leave. I can't do that. That's not the way I've ever fished or ever been brought up to fish and everything I know. So, it is what it is. That's the way fishing is today. And you hear a lot of fans complaining because they don't want to see the back of those guys. And it sort of took the heroes out of fishing with find them, going down the grass line and find them by mistake and winning the tournament. A lot of that stuff is suffering because of that. But, it is what it is. I admire the guys that can do it. I don't have the ability. maybe if I get me a pole where I got it right here like I'm looking at you, I might be able to do a little bit better. But I still wouldn't be able to throw because I'm used to throwing as far as you can throw, and here I am got to throw 30 feet, and that'd be a challenge for me.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's changing things, and I don't think this debate's going to end anytime soon. I mean, I did a podcast with Randy Blockett last week, so you can imagine the direction that went.
Oh yeah.
And my only thing from the beginning is I agree with a lot of that, like the whole like the mystique of not knowing what's going on. You know what I mean? Not just putting your rod over your shoulder and looking. I mean, you're fishing. I just hope that whatever decisions are made, it's made from an educated point. That's been my point from the start. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people out there throwing opinions and making opinions sound like facts, but they're not. I mean, we need to make a smart decision on the future, and just by us talking about it right now, there are people that will get in arguments in the comments. David, I told you I've always been a huge fan of you growing up. And we could talk about a lot of highlights in your career, but let's talk about some lowlights. One of my favorite David Fritts clip that lives on to this day is when you fell in the water on Bassmaster TV.
Yeah, that was at a Superstars tournament in Peoria, Illinois. Yeah, that was Ray Scott saved me in that because everybody's saying, well, he's disqualified. He fell out of the boat. He was outside the boat, but I still have one arm on it. So Ray stuck up for me on that deal. And it was just when I reached over to get the fish, it was like I got too far out and my head was under the water. And I'm thinking, something's got to give here. I can't keep going like this. So I flopped in the water and threw the fish in the boat and got back in the boat. But yeah, that was quite a memorable deal. That strand rain suit is probably one of the most popular items I have in a museum there in North Carolina. So everybody talks about the strand rain suit, and that was and you still see it on any of the old Bassmaster shows is on there, but it was just purely an accident, and I had to make a decision: was I going to drown or was I going to get in the water? Because I just leaned out too far, and back then I was probably a little bit bigger, and I was a little bit top heavy, so.
I hear you there. I hear you.
And I end up didn't win the tournament. I finished second. I should have won it, but you know how that is. I should have won a lot of them, but sometimes everything's got to be perfect to win.
You won the first classic you ever fished. Tell me what, I mean, at that time in the sport with as many eyeballs as were on the classic, to be up there with Ray Scott, with, what did that feel like to be there?
Well, it's the greatest feeling in the world. I mean, I tell you what really drove me the year before when I threw that fish back and missed the classic by a pound. I sat up there and watched Bob Hamilton win, and he won it with a crankbait, and that just irked me to no end. I'm thinking, man, and I'm sitting up there with one of the Ranger reps, and I'm telling him, I said, man, if I was in this tournament, I think I'd have a good chance. And that really drove me to be a little more persistent. And actually, in '93, I had a great year. I mean, not for the Classic. I mean, I had a really good year that year, and because I was so determined. But to get up there and to win in front of all them people, there ain't nothing that equals it. I mean, if you're a fisherman, that's got to be everybody's ultimate goal. And to achieve that is just very humbling. And, you go for about 6 months and don't realize what you did. And then you start realizing, man, it's just a tournament, but it's with all the pressure, with all the hype going into it, it makes it extremely hard. But I was in my element. I was doing what I like to do. I was throwing my crankbait. I was feeling those fish, and you know, I've changed it a little bit since then. You know, taking the fish around the boat, I don't do much anymore, but a lot of those fish were barely hooked, and I had to really be easy with them. And remember, I told you I figured out something to catch 9 out of 10 of them. That was part of it. You know, rod, reel, low stretch line. There's a lot of things that went along with that. But I caught every one of them and won the classic. The year that I should have won, another one there that Dion Hibden won, I finished third, and I had the fish in my hand 2 times to win it, and got in a hurry, and just I had the I had my hand under his belly, and started to pick up, and it just slid out of my hand. The bait was already come out of his mouth, and if I would have just took a little bit more time, and I didn't catch every one of them. That's why I say if you catch 9 out of 10 bass, you're going to win. I mean, you're going to win. And but I recommend winning the classic to anybody. It's the greatest feeling that a fisherman can ever achieve. Angler of the Year rivals it. I mean, but it's not in front of people you can see, like 25,000 people in a coliseum. It's just totally different. And you know, when I won, it was like, man, everybody in this place wanted me to win. I mean, it's really a special feeling.
How when you watch other people win, like Jeff Gustafson this past year, there has to be some kind of connection. Do you feel a connect? I mean, because there's just so few people who have ever won it. What does it feel after being a champion? Feel like to watch other people accomplish it?
Well, I know what they're in for, and I know that, you know, you don't win the classic because you didn't deserve to win. It's a lot of work, a lot of know-how, and it just depends where you're at, and if that tournament gets in your element, that's when. But it's amazing. I mean, they have been. Lord, I've been to the classic every year for I don't know how many years. A lot. Even before I won the classic, I was going to the classic. So it's probably, I know how they feel. I know what's going on. And you just have to smile. I mean, whoever wins, I mean, especially I love the ones that win that really deserve the win, that done everything the right way. And there's been quite a few of those. And it was just our day. And then sometimes it's just, you know, accidents happen. Well, there's a good accident to happen when you flip a 4-pounder over a limb that you should have never caught. So, you know, a lot of that stuff, they always told me that a lot of times you make your own luck.
Yeah.
And if things are going good, everything goes good. And that's what happens. Then when things go bad, then everything goes bad. So that's sort of the way fishing is. But man, I would recommend winning a classic to anybody.
I've never won one, but it does seem like a good thing to do in life.
Well, at least you're on stage with them. So.
Yeah. I mean, I tell my kids every year, I'm like, I've never won, but just so you know, I'm the second last dude on that stage. So many people you've got to fish with, so many people you've got to experience and get relationships with. I'd like to just run through some of them and you give me some thoughts on them, whether it's a story, whether it's a, you know, so I'll just start with the king, basically. King Clun. Tell me about Rick Clun.
Well, like I say, I've never fished with Rick, but I fished against him for as long as I've been fishing. And in the day, even today, Rick's always in competition. He's always going to be one to beat, especially if fish are up in his zone. And I admire him. I mean, man, he was in the top 5 the tournament I won on Lake Eufaula, which was an FLW event. And Van Dam was in it. Who else was in it? I don't remember. But Clun was the one I was worried about because I knew, and he was fishing close, and he had that shallow deal going on. So the Rick Clun is a true gentleman to the sport. He's not going to ease in on you. And actually, I've talked to Rick more in the last 2 or 3 years than I ever have. But Rick's he's the kind of person you want to know where you're fishing at because you ain't got to worry about it. and he's very honest, and he's very persistent. And a lot of times that's what fishing is being persistent, making multiple casts to where you really think there's a fish at. And a lot of people don't have that. He has
Denny Brower.
that. Well, I ended up beating Denny out for Angler of the Year in 1994. Was at Lake Eufaula. And all I can say is it was my time to win. But Denny was, man, he was always somebody that was in competition. I mean, you had to worry about Denny everywhere you went because he always found them shallow. And he was about as good as there was, with a jig or a worm or whatever it is, pitching in those bushes. And Denny was sort of quiet. He didn't. I mean, he wasn't quite as personable as some of the people, but he was so concentrated on what he was doing. And Danny was very proficient at figuring out what kind of bush, what kind of limb, where that fish was at. Is amazing. I mean, it was amazing. I watched him. We was at Lake Lanier in Georgia, and I saw him running in the pocket. And he'd go in there and just fish one limb or one tree. I'm thinking, what in the world's going on? And he had that pattern going where he knew exactly what tree, what limb, how deep it needed to be, and it was amazing. I mean, that's sort of like the way that I used to do crankbait fishing, but it was amazing to be able to translate that into fishing shallow. But Denny was one of those that didn't give you a lot of praise. He wasn't too happy when I won Angler of the Year, but Denny was very competitive, but he also was very honest and a really good guy, really good competitor, and really he's one of the ones you had to fish against every tournament.
Kevin Van Dam.
Well, Kevin's probably, he's won more than anybody. And Kevin had a good drive to him. In the early days, it was real cocky, and I knew if he could ever get over that, people would like him better. And he did overcome that, and he got, Kevin could do anything from throwing a spinning reel. So I don't even own a spinning reel, but he could do it all. Any technique, he was going to be in the top 5 fishermen in it. And he grew too, because he was in a classic that I won, and he was in some of the tournaments where I fished with him, and like I say, like you follow, and tried to, because he had to catch them. And but Kevin is a really good learner. And another thing, I think the forward facing sort of getting him a little bit because his eyes ain't quite as good as they used to be. But man, I mean, when you went to a tournament, you could count on him being in the top 10 somewhere in most tournaments. And he was definitely, we had a lot of guys back then that could win anything they fished, and he was definitely one of them. But I like Kevin is really, in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years. Well, actually, ever since I won a classic in 1993, he has got better every year, and he's got better with people every year, and he's got better fishing every year.
Here's a name from the past, Chet Douthit.
Oh, Chet. Me and Chet used to stay together.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we did. We roomed together, and way back in the day. And Chet, man, he's a great guy. Chet could do about anything. He didn't understand, he's a lot better shallow than he was out deep, but I helped him in a few tournaments. Actually, one of them he made the top 10 cut in, and I won Lake Minnetonka. I said, I got this old place, Chet. I said, you can go over and try it. I said, there was a bunch of fish there, and he went over there and made top 10. So, but Chet was like Rick Clunn. He was really persistent, and he could actually make a fish bite where most people would have given up on a long time ago. And I seen him in an area at Well, when I was on the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair, I seen him sitting over there on a grass bed, and he sit there and he sit there and he comes in with a big bag, and I think, man, alive. But Chet is one of the great guys in fishing, and he I was also a great football player too. But
Yeah.
uh, Chet's a great guy. I mean, man, we had a lot of really good guys. We really did back in the '90s and 2000s. Just a lot of really, really good guys. Like I said, we had about 5 you had to watch out for. Other than that, everybody was good.
Okay. Well, hopefully I don't mention one of those 5 here. And
Yeah.
um, but you can also just say next question. But yeah, no, Chet was a former Miami Dolphin. I think he played for the
Yeah, he
Dolphins for a
was.
little while.
Yep.
Here's another name from the past: Basil Bacon.
Oh, Basil. I see him every year at the Hall of Fame, and Basil, we was always pretty good buddies. And you know, he liked that long rod in his hand too. I mean, Basil was, and but Basil was, you couldn't ask for a nicer guy. The guy was really good, especially up in his area. Anytime you run across a lake that was like Table Rock or Bull Shoals, I mean, he was just a killer on it, among others. But he was really dangerous with a jig and big long rod in his hand. But Basil, I remember Basil for being such a classy guy and never stepped on your toes, was always consistent, and just a good guy. Just a good guy. I mean, you know, I think that might be something that this day and time there's not quite as many of, but back then we had a lot of really good guys, and Basil was definitely on top of that list.
All right, let's get a little more current. Seth Fighter.
Well, I don't know Seth that good. I do know he is probably got more Fritz sides than I do, and which you know, he don't lie about it. He'll tell me call him on a crankbait. So uh, I like Seth, and I don't know him that well. Uh, I keep promising. Actually, I brought him a watermelon up to Lake Champlain. And I didn't run into him, so we ended up eating it because he always says, "I want a watermelon." So, but man, that's a good guy. He's sort of a loner, sort of stays out, but he gave me some hooks at one of the tournaments. I think we were at Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I stayed up every side of him. And man, them guys try to help you any way they can. They're just really good guys. He's a really good fisherman. And Seth is really versatile when it comes to your bait line. You know, your crankbaits, your jigs, your spinner baits, your chatterbaits, your top water, your jerk baits. I mean, that's one thing he has. He's good. He's pretty good at all of them, and uh, that's what I say about Seth Fighter is, you know, he can catch them anyway. And a lot of people can't do that, including myself, but he can do that. So anyway, great guy.
Final person I'm going to ask you about, and he's the chicken that laid the egg. That's what I always called him, Ray Scott.
Ray Scott, man, you know, Ray, he was everybody's buddy, and Ray treated people spectacular, and he promoted everybody like he was the best fisherman in the world. And you know, a lot of times Ray would put his arm around you, and he always promoted you and what you done, like me being a crankbait fisherman, or Jimmy Houston being a spinnerbait fisherman, or whatever. He always was really great about promoting you at what you were the best at. Now, I don't know what you can say about Ray Scott that don't everybody know. He is, man, he's a legend. He's the one that got this sport going. But I remember Ray Scott by the way he treated me and other fishermen, and the way he promoted us up on stage. And I always told your good points, never said anything negative, and he always found some way to make you laugh. And I mean, man, praise God, he's one of a kind. He's the best. So I don't know what else I can say.
He was one of a kind, and David Fritts, I think you too are one of a kind. And I thank you for everything you've done for this sport. And I know you're still going to be part of this sport, although I won't see you in the Elite Series. I hear you're fishing some NPFL stuff this year, and I look forward to seeing how that goes for you. But man, just thank you for everything you've given this sport, whether it be from the memories from competition or it be the design stuff that you've done. It's truly an amazing career, and an absolute honor for me to ever have been able to introduce you or say hello to you in the morning on the boat dock. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for everything you've done. You do a great job up there. I don't know, we had fishermen for a while, and we've had a few, but you've done a really good job. And I think Bass ought to give you a raise. I mean,
I'm all for it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. It's I'm gonna miss that. But I've got to try something. I thought, if I get away from multiple tournaments and sort of get on a month or 2 month deal and get back in the fall. My favorite time was fall fishing, and that's one thing we lack in bass. And used to in the top 100s, we always had 2 or 3 fall tournaments, and we'd have 2 or 3, and we only had to deal with sight fishing maybe one tournament of the year. So the schedule, I mean, and I don't know, I'm about done just because of my energy level, and I wish I could get a little bit of energy back, but I'm not done creating crankbaits. I know 2 or 3 crankbaits that if I can get somebody to make them, it's going to be a Fritts side senior when we get them made. So I don't know who's going to make them yet. I can't talk anybody into doing it, but anyway, we're going to get there. But it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for everything you've done for me and everything you do for everybody, all the fishermen. I mean, and it's a talent to be able to get up there and to speak and to recognize. One thing, I can't remember all the names, so I don't know if you were just shining up there on a little screen but and that's another thing. Ray Scott, he always knew who everybody was, and you do a great job, and you're very deserving. I don't know who could replace you, so I don't know what kind of compliment you can get any better than that.
Well, I'm not real good with compliments, and I thank you for that because that's incredible. Before I let you go, though, we want to start a brand new tradition on this show. You're going to be the first person ever to do it. I don't know who next week's guest is going to be, but I'm going to allow you to ask that person a question. It can be anything. Have you ever been in jail? Do you have tattoos? Or what's your favorite? Something fishing related. Give me a question for that person, and I'll ask them next week, and we'll find out.
All right. I guess my question would be, have you ever lied about a bait you caught them on?
It's a great question and a great way to start.
There's not many people that can answer that truthfully.
Well, we'll find out whoever next week's guest is. And once again, I thank you very much. The one and only Mr. David Fritts.
Yep. Thank you kindly.
What an amazing angler, an amazing man, and an amazing part of this amazing sport. And it'd be amazing if I didn't say amazing anymore, but I'm amazed by you guys tuning in here week after week. I thank you for that. Keep the grow going at 315,000 YouTube subscribers. You guys have made this show. So tell a buddy about this show. Keep the grow going. Enjoy being. Have a great week. And as always, Bob Cobb, take it away.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, because Bob Cobb of the Bassmasters told you to. You hear?